One of my lesser-known personal stories happened about 16 years ago when I woke up one morning and could not get out of bed. After 8 hours of sleep, I was physically exhausted. It went on for days, and I didn't know what to do. Jack Fairchild was the man who got me out of bed and back on my feet. While I had been exercising daily and eating what I thought was a healthy diet, Jack taught me not only how to live, but how to be alive. He's the reason I can go on the road, get up early, speak all day, eat dinner with the dental team, and wrap up my day energized and not exhausted. Since that time, Jack has worked with hundreds of dentists and team members to teach them the same in one of the most physically demanding professions there is. Jack has found solutions to health problems no one else could solve. He's saved careers, and he has saved lives. So let's have a Crown conversation with the man who got me out of bed and kept me there, and has kept countless Crown Council dentists and team members on the job living healthy, happy, productive lives. Certified clinical nutritionist, Jack Fairchild.
Thank y'all very much. I appreciate that. I'd like to take a second to thank Steve and Greg and the whole Crown Council family for inviting me back and giving me the opportunity. It is truly my privilege to be here, and I look forward to the time we're going to spend. A couple of things. First of all, I may have bit off more than I can chew, no pun intended, but I have 20 minutes, actually 19 minutes and some change, to present 40 minutes of information. So we're going to kind of move at a pretty fast pace. I do want you to know, though, that the slides that I have, because I have about 15 to 16 additional slides than what you all have in your syllabus, those are all up on my website presently, so you can download that and take advantage of that. My goal this morning is to give you all some tools that you can take home starting Monday, tomorrow. I guess you can even start today if you want. No time better than the present, but that you can use these tools to start moving towards more optimal health. That's going to be the goal today, and I hope that when we finish that I've achieved that. So we're going to jump right in and get moving. In sticking with kind of the common theme that I have spoke on for, I guess, the last 17 years I've been involved with Crown Council. I've had the chance to speak several times, and essentially we always come back to stress response. So I want to talk today about what stress is, stress response, and maybe more importantly, how it is affecting you, and maybe in ways that you aren't even aware of. Okay, so we're going to jump right in, first of all, with actually what is stress. Stedman's Medical Dictionary says that stress is the reaction of the body to forces of a deleterious nature, infections, and various abnormal states that tend to disturb normal physiological equilibrium. In essence, homeostasis. Now, the problem with this definition, if you look at it, it says various abnormal states. There's a good chance that every one of us in here at this very moment is in a various abnormal state. So that really doesn't tell us exactly what stress is, just kind of a broad brush. So let's maybe talk more specifically, though, why this is important, because you do want to understand it. Everybody deals with stress on a regular basis, but we want to understand why it's so important to handle stress or stressors optimally. So bottom line, science says that maintaining biochemical balance during times of stress is vital in preventing, delaying, and or reducing the harmful effects of age-related illnesses. Mr. Marsh, that was just up here, just presented a nice study from Harvard, which is going to be essentially telling us the same thing. We can make choices to make changes within our lives and improve our overall health. I believe it's somewhere around 80% of all doctor's visits are actually due to stress responses. So very important for us to get a handle on this. Quickly, we're going to move into what a healthy response, stress response is. So we're going to start here with the first arrow, and you'll see below this it says stressors. Stressors fall under many of categories: mental, emotional, chemical, structural, electromagnetic. I mean, you name it, a stressor can do any number of things. But the way that it works is it creates a stimulus to the central nervous system. It activates the sympathetic nervous system, which then activates the hypothalamus pituitary axis. The hypothalamus then radios up to the adrenal and says, hey guys, we have a major stressor going on. We need you to do what you can to handle the scenario. So what we'll see is we see a temporary increase of adrenaline. Everybody's experienced the adrenaline rush, right? At some point. The human body has to have some type of balance. Adrenaline is the absolute most oxidizing, free radical producing hormone in the human body. So the way the body compensates is it produces another hormone called cortisol. Cortisol is known as a stress hormone. You may have all seen it at some time if you're watching late night TV and you're seeing information or infomercial on belly fat and how cortisol is involved. There is truth to that. What happens though is the increase of cortisol radios back to the pituitary and hypothalamus and says, I've taken care of the stressor, so shut off your command, and everything's settling back down. We're all back to normal. The problem, and it's what we see in today's world, is that this stress response continues to go on day in and day out, continually, for any number of reasons. So what happens is this, quote, healthy stress response turns into what we call a maladaptive stress response, and so we start having increased and continual elevated levels of cortisol. So we'll talk real briefly about cortisol. Definition of cortisol is a steroid hormone that is produced by humans in the adrenal glands. It is released in response to stress and low blood glucose concentration. Keep this last part in mind, low blood glucose concentration. We're going to talk more about that here in just a bit. You'll see that the correlation with cortisol, if we just look at the picture here, it affects brain or neurological function, obviously bone mass, liver, muscle, and it specifically counteracts insulin's effects in the body. So what I did was kind of put together a graph showing the many correlations of cortisol to your health. And if you'll take a look kind of in the upper middle area, you're going to see where it says elevated cortisol. I've kind of highlighted some of these in dark green. I believe you all have this slide. I've highlighted some of these in dark green just to kind of point out. If you kind of go diagonally up to the left, we see cortisol specifically associated and a causative factor with obesity. Obesity then affects, if you look down left, something called aromatase upregulation. If you're a male especially, something you do not want. Aromatase actually causes your testosterone to convert into estrogen. Now that may help the communications with you and your spouse, but the bottom line is you don't want too much of that going on. If we then look directly north of aromatase upregulation, we see estrogen dominance. You all, I'm sure, have heard in the literature, estrogen dominance is associated with things like breast cancer and prostate cancer, autoimmune disease, thyroid dysfunction, the list goes on. You'll see bottom left of elevated cortisol, insulin resistance. Type 2 diabetes is a precursor, also known as metabolic syndrome or syndrome X. A little further from insulin resistance, we'll see androgen dominance. So one of the things that happens with females is when there's insulin resistance, we start seeing an increase in testosterone. This can set up problems such as polycystic ovary syndrome. So then we have anovulatory problems, we have infertility, I mean the list goes on. If we look due south of elevated cortisol, we're going to see increased intestinal permeability. Now, in my practice, I see a tremendous amount of gastrointestinal problems. So, again, the key is trying to find the stressors that may be driving this response and helping to create gastrointestinal dysfunction. If you look kind of down to the bottom right-hand corner, you're going to see adrenal exhaustion. Once cortisol continues its rampant run for years. Maybe for some people it's not that long, but for many it can be 20, 30, 40 years. The adrenals get worn out. Now they're not able to produce cortisol like they should. And so we'll see things like depression. We also see obesity. And more specifically, we see reactive hypoglycemia, which is something that I see quite often. And it's something that I hear from Steve that he sees quite often when he comes into your dental practices. We're going to talk more about that as well. So what happens is when this cortisol connection is going on and continuing to go on, it sets us up for all kinds of health issues, symptoms. Some of these may sound familiar. I'm just going to pick a few of them so we don't run through all of them. Fatigue, poor sleep pattern. We're going to see poor mental focus. Down towards the bottom of this first column, we see weight gain, difficulty losing weight, abdominal obesity. We see here in the second column things like decreased sex drive, hormonal imbalances. Down towards the bottom, thyroid imbalances or dysfunction, blood pressure changes. Certainly things like high cholesterol, triglycerides, and maybe the big one is diabetes and heart disease. Now, without getting too far off topic, this actually, cortisol in this whole scenario that I'm setting up for you is connected with systemic inflammation. I know you all are seeing this in the office with perio problems. This also goes back. What you all are seeing will tie right in with what we're talking about. So what happens is when these symptoms continue, you're forced to take action. Unfortunately, most people are forced to do something like this. We lean towards medications in an effort to solve symptoms. Unfortunately, they just simply solve the symptoms, but they've never addressed the root cause, and that's the real problem. And I believe it was Joseph Grenny yesterday made the comment about the sixth most common reasons for death is medical intervention, number 6 on the top 10 list, and he's right. He is exactly right. So in my opinion, this is not the best approach. It's a quick fix approach, and while a quick fix works for a period of time, it eventually is going to stop working and or you're going to have more issues, therefore you'll be looking at using more medications. So more specifically, in order to kind of get to the root cause of these stress responses, you have to know where the stressors are coming from. And in the past, my conversations with you all have been centered around what can we do to reduce stress. What I want to talk about at this point is what can we do to figure out where the stress is coming from? What is the underlying mechanism? I'll give you a real quick example. I had an individual about a year ago with, just out of the blue, severely elevated liver enzymes. Long story short, she was sent to Scott and White in Texas, and she was told that they wanted to do a biopsy to try to figure out what was going on with these liver enzymes. Long story short, what I found out was that there was simply a bacterial infection within the gallbladder. So what we did is we addressed it nutritionally, and we went back 6 weeks later, liver enzymes are back down to normal. So it can be something just like that, an infection that you wouldn't believe is a stressor, but in essence, it is a major stressor. So what I want to talk about, though, specifically is if you look at the 6 vectors of stress chart here, you're going to see that we have these 6 areas: spiritual, mental, emotional, external energy field disturbances, structural stress, chemical stress, and inherited stress. The very bottom of chemical stress, you'll see dysglycemia. And I want to talk to you about this one because this is one that you can change every single day, at every single meal, at every single snack. You have the tools, you have the ability to improve your health every 3 hours. So what's dysglycemia? It's an inability to maintain normal serum glucose levels or a failure to maintain homeostasis. Now you're going to see here it says hypoglycemia or low blood sugar. Now you'll recall back when we talked about cortisol and the definition that cortisol helps to counteract low blood sugar. Without getting into too many details, it does so at the expense of your muscle mass. So when blood sugar dips too low, you actually metabolize some of your lean muscle mass and you convert it to fuel and it raises the fuel gauge. But now you've just exchanged quality tissue to raise your blood sugar and basically protect you. We also see that cortisol is associated with dysglycemia in the areas of insulin resistance, metabolic syndrome, and ultimately diabetes. So let's talk briefly about how this whole pattern works. Essentially, we see an overuse or an abuse of sugar or starch. What happens is the cells fail to respond to insulin signal. Now that's partly due to the fact that cortisol desensitizes the cells to insulin. So what happens is the pancreas ultimately has to say, wow, in order for me to get this blood sugar down, I'm going to have to pump out much more insulin to overwhelm the cells to make them listen, so to speak. So the pancreas does this. It overcompensates. The excess insulin drives the blood sugar down, usually too low. If anybody here experienced the mid-afternoon slump, mid-morning slump, looking for a cookie or soda or something along those lines to kind of pick you back up, that's exactly what's happening. We're seeing blood sugar drops and you're looking for a quick fix. So what will occur is if you don't have time, now many of you that I speak with tell me, Jack, I'm busy during the day. I don't have time to take those snacks. So here's what will occur. When the blood sugar drops, as I mentioned earlier, the adrenals are stimulated because this is a stress response. The adrenals then pump out cortisol, once again, metabolizing your own muscle mass to raise the fuel gauge to keep you functioning. It's a great system. It works very well. It's just that it will burn you out quickly. The process starts over again. So let's just kind of look at this because this is, I guess, a better show and tell. If we look at the orange or red line here, this is what I was just talking about. If you eat something that isn't as sustaining, so let's say if you're a donut coffee kind of person in the morning, blood sugar is going to spike high. The insulin is going to force it back down, often too low. Cortisol is going to come in, save the day, raise it back up. But this is a really vicious cycle that you get into. Ideally would be the white line, which is a balanced blood sugar. And if we can balance this, then we stay right in the middle. So I'm going to show you how we do that actually. So real quickly, and you all have these two, I believe, in your syllabus. So I'm going to make it real simple. The 3 blocks, pick one from each, and there's your meal. Okay? If you're having a snack, reduce the amount by half or 2/3. But again, you pick one from each meal, one from each box, and that becomes your meal. So that I'm not spending too much time here, let's just quickly go to page 2. This is the breakdown of carbohydrate classification because everybody's always wondering, well, I think I'm eating okay. I'm eating potatoes and rice and some veggies. But these things can also be, or they are, high starch. And they can convert to sugar quickly and create this whole response. So when you get a chance, read through these. This will actually set you up and kind of walk you through it. I'm going to hit some key talking points. We'll look at number 2 here. The ideal ratio is about a 2-to-1 of total carbs to protein. It's generally accepted as the ideal ratio. More specifically, it's about a 1.8 to 2.2 to 1. The idea is if you have 30 grams of carbohydrate, you're going to need at least 15 grams of protein to try to balance the blood sugar response. Eat small meals during the day. I think Steve will tell you that's worked for him for quite some time. Incorporate high-quality fats and oils into the diet. Real important. I don't have the time to underscore enough the benefit of healthy quality fats. We've all been, scared away from fats, and we really need to get back to them. And obviously avoid or minimize the use of stimulants such as coffee, soda, guarana, ephedra, and all your energy drinks. Go back to the 6 vectors of stress because what I want to try to do is the last tool I want to give you guys is some way to help you all figure out what is stressing you. Because most of us, when we talk about stress, say, mentally, emotionally, I'm okay. I'm in a great place. But that may not be the case. It may be that you have, as I said earlier, an infection. Maybe it's allergies. Maybe it's simply arthritis. Maybe you have inflammation in the joints, but inflammation in the joint tissue creates a stress response. It's the same scenario. So what I've done here is I've taken these 6 areas and I took the subgroups I broke each subgroup down into its own category, and I put together approximately 15 to 20 questions, give or take, of each group. Now, you all don't have this in your slides, but I do have copies. Okay, Greg will take care of that. So you'll fill this out, and it'll give you an idea about where you need potentially to focus, where your focus should be, areas that maybe you haven't thought about, but show up through the questionnaire. You can then get, with the questionnaires, we have the assessment chart. You'll kind of see around the outer circle, I should say the outer color circle, you'll see a scoring box. As you score these sections, fill them in here, and it will give you the information that you need, and again, kind of point you in the right direction. That would be our hope. Key stress modifiers, you have this in your slides as well, so again, I'm not going to go over all these. I want to mention one, though. Down at the bottom, second to the bottom, spend 15 minutes a day watching children laugh and play. I don't know about you guys, but I enjoyed the videos yesterday of the kids and the marshmallows. I mean, it was an interesting study, but I had such fun. I mean, I had a smile on my face watching kids. Life is so stressful, and we don't take the time to relax. A lot of times we don't have the energy maybe to get out and run around with the kids, but you can actually go to a playground, or you can go to a school if you have kids in school and observe kids playing 10, 15 minutes. It's wonderful. I have a lady who lives far out in the country, and I've recommended this to her many times. She's going through some difficult emotional time. And so what we've done with her is we've actually found a place where she can drive to a kennel, and she can actually play with dogs. It's the same thing. But the idea is to relax. Bottom line, we're getting close to wrapping up here. Health is a matter of choice. And as Scott just spoke about, everything is about choice. Whether it's finances, whether it's your health, buying a car, I mean, whatever it is, whatever you're eating, everything is about choices. Most people believe that if you're not sick, then you're automatically healthy. In other words, most people think that you are one or the other. And yet we don't understand that we're on a health continuum. Most people kind of fluctuate right here between this middle third, between chronic symptoms and toxins. They kind of fluctuate in between there. So whenever you think that, hey, I'm healthy just because I don't have a runny nose or I'm not running a fever, that may not be the case. So I want you to just kind of start thinking about which direction you're going to choose, because as I said when I first came up here, you have the right and the ability every single day to make choices that are going to impact your health. Now, specifically, we've talked about diet, but again, every 2 to 4 hours, you have the right to make a choice that's either going to move you towards optimal wellness or move you towards disease and degeneration, ultimately death. Wow. Now, what you guys don't know is that just prior to this picture, they were told that if they'd wait 15 minutes, they'd get 2. So I don't know. No, the idea is that you don't have to be perfect, okay? It's not about being perfect 100% of the time, but it's about finding a good balance that is a balance for you. That may be strict for one person and maybe less so for the next, but the balance is the key. I hope that the tools, the questionnaire, and the BioBalance pages will give you guys a good start. If you'd like more help, if you maybe have a case that's a little bit more difficult than you figuring out on your own, I'd invite you to give me a call, and we can certainly have a conversation about what we can do to possibly connect those dots and see if we can get you headed in the right direction. And lastly, I'm going to finish up with another photo from Mr. Steve. Coke goes with everything, right? And he's taking some pills. I don't know whose those are. Or they're my pills, okay. But with a Diet Coke? Thank you, Ron Massey, by the way. I appreciate that. One of my favorites here in the bottom left. What fits your busy schedule better, exercising 1 hour a day or being dead 24 hours a day? Last thing, the longer you wait to act upon a new idea, the less likely you are to act at all. So I encourage you to incorporate the tools I've shared with you and begin your path towards optimal wellness. Thank y'all very much.